Hi everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at our very first anchor text for our 4th grade ELA literature study. And our very first text is called Porpoises in Peril. I'm sure that you got this in your take-home bag, and maybe you've even had a chance to take a picture walk and take a look through it and decide what you think maybe it could be about, or make some predictions, or see what you think the genre might be. This is a new text for me too, and I'm pretty excited to read it with you. Before we read, I want to share with you an anchor chart that I use to discuss the idea of plot. You've probably heard people talk about plot when we're talking about stories. And to be very simple, a plot is the journey that a story takes. It's the journey that we take through the course of a story. So at the very beginning of a story, we hear about the characters and the setting. After we learn about the characters and the setting, oftentimes the author brings us up into the problem. Several events might bring us up into what is the problem in the story. Sometimes the problem of the story is called the conflict in the story. And most of the time, the problem gets worse before it gets better. Later on in the story, oftentimes we hit a climax where something starts to change. And then after that, we are moved down into resolution and solution. The author helps us to understand how the problem was solved. We're going to talk more about this plot line and the journey that the story takes as we move forward. I just wanted to remind you a little bit about this before we read the first pages of Porpoises in Peril. We're going to read pages 3 through 9. We're going to get to know who the characters are in the story, where they are, the setting, which doesn't mean just place, it also means time. And what are they doing? What's going on in the story? So go ahead and find your Porpoises in Peril. If you need to pause this video right here to go get your book, great. Please remember that when we read an anchor text, it's most helpful for you to just keep your fingers underneath the words or use a little guide to read along with me so that you're attending to the words while I read. Porpoises in Peril. It's from a series called Science Squad. Does that give you any idea? Any hints about what the story might be about? Chapter 1. Jada sprinted into the headquarters of the Global Environmental Research Agency known as GERA, G-E-R-A, which is like an acronym, right? 4 initials together. She ran up 5 flights of steps, opened the door labeled training, and saw her Science Squad colleagues sitting around the lab tables flipping through a fat pile of papers, their new assignment. A Science Squad. That sounds like a group of scientists. Here's what that picture looks like. Thank you for joining us, Professor Q said. Aw, I lost, said Cam, looking dejected. Lost what? A rare plant? Asked Jada as she slipped into a chair and pulled the tablet from her backpack. Cam was a botanist who had a backyard greenhouse full of rare plants. A botanist is a scientist who studies plants. No, I lost a bet with Kate, said Cam. I bet that you'd be late for our meeting and now I have to buy her lunch. Cam sighed. But speaking of plants, I have a new one that I'd like you to see it. Hold on, said Kate. If he starts talking about plants, our meeting will last twice as long. Kate's dark eyes sparkled while Reggie, the 4th member of the squad, chuckled. The professor pushed the forward button on her wheelchair and glided closer to the others. She moved her long braid from her left shoulder to her right shoulder. It was a signal that she was ready to discuss an important environmental problem. Sounds like she's using some nonverbal ways to communicate with her science team. She looked straight at them and said, "Sick porpoises." Reggie snapped his pencil in half. His shoulders tensed. He hated to hear about any animal being sick, whether it was a wild one or a pet. I know you have the book in front of you, but I want to make sure that you had a chance with that image. Professor Q continued, local officials spotted several porpoises near an island off the northern coast of Taiwan exhibiting uncharacteristic behavior. Uncharacteristic means not usual for that species. Because the porpoises have been losing weight quickly, the officials believe that something or someone has contaminated The local food supply of these sea animals, I'm guessing that you can understand that contaminated means changed in some way that is detrimental or bad for the porpoises. Here's what that image looks like. There is a risk that the porpoise population will decline and that eventually all porpoises will die. So the officials asked for help. I do not have to tell you the importance of maintaining the proper ecological balance in the world's environment. One mishap in one part of the globe can have disastrous effects on the opposite side of the world. In fact, scientists are discovering all kinds of ways that even though we seem like we are separate species on separate continents or in separate countries or in separate regions, that we depend on one another as Earthlings. The science squad members looked at each other. They knew how important this was. When do we leave? Reggie asked excitedly. Your flight departs in 2 hours, Professor Q answered. I've made airline and hotel reservations for you, and your JIRA credit cards are loaded with enough money for living expenses and any emergencies that might arise. Jada has all the information on her tablet, and the rest of you have hard copies. Study it on your flight. Oh, and good luck. Sounds like they were set off on a mission. There they are. After their 11-hour flight from Los Angeles to Taipei, that's a big city in Taiwan, then a 2-hour flight on a tiny shaky plane, then a long moonlit walk, the science squad finally checked in to the tiny bamboo inn on the small island waters between Taiwan and Japan. Did we just experience a setting change? Yeah, so we started out somewhere that seemed to be somewhere maybe in the United States, and quickly the 4 characters changed settings. They've moved to a small island between Taiwan and Japan. We don't know very much about the characters yet, but we do know that there are 4 scientists who have been sent off on this mission. I wanted to remind you that as we think about where we are on the plot line. We're learning about the characters and the setting. We know a little bit about the problem, and I'm guessing that pretty soon we're going to find out more about the problem. Here they are. They're heading into their bamboo hut, and they're ready to discover and study what is happening to the porpoises. I'm wondering what your questions are right now. What do you think? Can you make some predictions in your own mind about what might be happening next? What do you think could be contaminating the food supply of the porpoises or the waters that they live in? What do you think the scientists are going to do to be able to study what's happening to the porpoises? Those are good questions. Go ahead and stop this video, and when you come back, you will need your ELA notebook. And we found out on Tuesday morning what this notebook is all about. Just a reminder, it has 2 sides. We have a respond to reading side and a word work side of our notebook. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about our respond to reading around the characters in this story. Come back.